Coming up next, one of rock's most mesmerizing frontmen was playing one of his band's new songs as the house band for one of California's most happening clubs. When he suddenly went off on a creative tangent, let's say, that harkened back to a story from Greek mythology, but the audience had no idea what was going on. He took a song that was already about death and birth and freedom and sex and murder and madness and whatever else you can think of, and he put some relish on it. He screamed out a profanity-laced desire that would shock every generation thereafter that would hear the story or the song. And that's not all. There's some insane stories that go with this epic 12-minute song, including how the singer was fired for performing it, and how he got buck naked and hosed down a recording studio with a fire extinguisher. There's plenty more where that came from. It's all coming up next on a story you're not going to want to miss on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you remember playing a competitive game of chutes and ladders with your family growing up, you're gonna dig this channel of deep musical nostalgia. Make sure to subscribe below right now, click the big red button so you always know when our interviews and our new stuff comes out. We also have a Patreon, check us out there, we have more content there, and that helps us keep it a daily channel. Man, how do I even introduce today's song? It's so messed up, so insane, I've wondered for some time if I should even cover it. But it's also one of the most interesting songs of its time. So after pondering on it for a few months, I've decided to enter the doors of perception and tackle this strange and torturous song. On today's episode, from their 1966 debut record, it's The Doors with their truly haunting and enigmatic 11+ minute epic, The End.
This is the end, beautiful friend.
The beginning of The Doors goes back to a chance meeting between lead singer Jim Morrison and keyboardist Ray Manzarek. The two acquaintances had previously met at UCLA's film school, but crossed paths again on the beach in Venice, California. This was in the summer of 1965. Originally, Morrison had no aspirations of becoming a singer. But a poet by nature, he had started writing songs based on, in his words, a fantastic rock concert that was going on inside my head. After the subject of songwriting came up, Manzarek asked Morrison to sing some of his lyrics. Jim then serenaded Ray with the opening words of Moonlight Drive, a song that would later make its way onto the Doors' sophomore record, Strange Days.
On our Moonlight Drive.
After hearing Jim's lyrics, Ray was in shock. He'd never heard anything like it. So he invited Jim to join his group, Rick and the Ravens. The lineup featured Ray's two brothers, Rick and Jim, drummer John Densmore and bassist Patricia Hansen. With Morrison on the mic, the Ravens recorded a demo that actually included several future Doors tracks. However, the EP failed to garner any interest in the music industry, and so Ray's brothers, along with Patricia, left the band. From there, the remaining trio renamed themselves The Doors, after Aldous Huxley's The Doors of Perception, and they enlisted guitarist Robbie Krieger. By 1966, The Doors were hired on as the house band at the famed LA club, the Whiskey A Go-Go. There they played 2 sets a night. Among other early Doors tracks, their repertoire included today's featured song, The End.
This is the end, my only friend.
It's interesting, The End began as a simple 2-verse song, a goodbye love song, a farewell track to Jim Morrison's girlfriend, Mary Werbelow, who had followed him from Florida to California. Hence the opening lines, "This is the end, beautiful friend, the end."
The end of our dear life.
John Densmore remembered that Jim, who didn't play an instrument, sang the song to the band a cappella. Everyone was in awe. It was dark, and it was beautiful. John thought it sounded like an epitaph. Decades later, Robbie Krieger talked about the song on VH1 Storytellers. He said, "When Jim and I first came up with the first little part of it, it was just a little love song. It was nothing like the epic thing that it is today. But then as we played it, it got longer and longer and more weird." The Doors developed The End during live performances at the Whiskey. Since the guys were expected to deliver 2 sets a night, they filled the time by extending their songs. This gave them an opportunity, to experiment and improvise. And this is how the end evolved into a nearly 12-minute Indian raga jam. For the song, Morrison used a multiplicity of perplexing images. Lost in a Roman wilderness of pain, weird scenes inside the gold mine, ride the snake to the lake. Together, they paint a sonic picture that has kept fans and critics alike debating its meaning since the 60s.
Wilderness of pain.
Looking to the source, Morrison was either reluctant to give a definitive interpretation or just didn't have one to give. When interviewed by Rolling Stone, he said at the end, and I quote, "To tell you the truth, every time I hear that song, it means something else to me. I really don't know what I was trying to say." However, Jim did give one clue while being interviewed by Lizzie James. Speaking about the song's connection to death, he said, and I quote, "People fear death, even more than pain. It's strange that they fear death. I mean, life hurts a lot more than death. At the point of death, the pain is over. I guess it is a friend." End of quote.
To your eyes again.
Manzarek, for his part, gave us another clue, speaking directly to the line, "The blue bus is calling us." Ray called the bus Jim's version of the Egyptian solar boat, a boat that the pharaohs rode on through infinity, through eternity. He said, "The blue bus was for me a vehicle that would take you on a voyage into magical places."
Is calling us.
But even with those clues, there's still much more that we don't know compared to what we do know. But let's keep digging. On August 21st, 1966, Jim Morrison didn't show up for the Doors gig at the Whiskey A Go-Go. So the guys went on without him. Ray actually filled in on vocals. After finishing the first set without Morrison, the guys went looking for him at his apartment. And after pounding on the door for several minutes, the unpredictable frontman finally emerged wearing nothing but underwear and boots. And he was also tripping on acid. Somehow Jim's bandmates got him dressed and back to the Whiskey for the next show. And after downing a few beers, Jim seemed coherent enough to take the stage, apparently. However, by mid-set, Morrison, who was still out of his head, turned to his bandmates and told them, "We're going to play the end." Now, this was a song they usually reserved for their closer. Still, the band, they just went along with it. At this point, the end was now pushing 12 minutes in length. And Morrison had been sensing over repeated performances that the song was leading him somewhere. But with that night's rendition, Jim would definitely discover the destination. Now, 6.5 minutes in, Morrison launched into a recitation about a murderer.
The killer awoke before dawn.
And as he did, he began to realize what the whole song was about, what it had been leading up to. The killer awoke before dawn, he put his boots on, he took a face from the ancient gallery, and he walked on down the hall.
From the ancient gallery, and he walked on down the hall.
After paying a visit to his sister and then his brother, this killer continues on until he reaches his father's door. There, with the song now approaching its dramatic climax, he calls out, "Father, yes, son, I want to kill you."
Father, yes, son, I want to kill you.
All eyes were on Jim at this point. Morbidly curious, the packed house awaited in anticipation. Time seemed to stand still even. The band and their audience held their collective breath. And here's the thing, it's likely no one but Ray realized where Jim was gonna go next. Ray couldn't believe it. Jim was going Oedipus Rex. For the uninitiated, Oedipus Rex is an ancient Greek drama that tells the story of a man fated to kill his father and marry his mother. Trying to escape this horrific prophecy, he leaves home, not realizing the family who raised him had actually adopted him. Tragically, during his travels, the prophecy is fulfilled as he kills his true father in a skirmish and then unwittingly marries his mother. But Morrison's take on Oedipus in the end was somehow even more twisted and more graphic. After announcing his father's murder, the killer then addresses his mother and cries out, "Mother, I want to..." Well, I can't repeat it here, obviously. Go listen to the track, but I think you get where I'm going.
I want to.
As soon as Morrison said it, everyone in the Whiskey was stunned. But pressing on, he exploded on stage, playing faster and faster, and Jim whirled around, whipping the crowd up into a frenzy. The band was going nuts. Finally, when the music was over, the Doors stepped off the stage to enthusiastic applause. there was one person who was not clapping. It was the Whiskey's manager, Phil Tanzini. After cornering the band, Tanzini cussed him out, calling them sickos. Then he promptly fired him. Smiling with a wise-ass grin, Morrison quipped, "Sure, Phil, but do we still have a bar tab?" Speechless, Phil stormed off, and the Doors' reign at the Whiskey, well, it had reached the end. As we continue to break down song, I do want to thank our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear, the glasses I always wear. Defeat inflation right now with Zenni frames. Design your own color and style and get up to 80% off regular retail prices. Just click on our info button or our link below.
There's danger on the edge of town.
Now, fortunately for the band, they had recently signed a record deal with Elektra, so getting fired wasn't a real crushing blow. 3 days later, the Doors entered Sunset Sound Recorders with producer Paul Rothchild and got to work recording their debut album. Ray Manzarek explained, Jim was giving voice in a rock and roll setting to the Oedipus complex. He wasn't saying he wanted to do that to his own mom and dad. He was just reenacting a bit of Greek drama. He had been involved in the production of Oedipus Rex back at Florida State University. It was just theater. It was all make-believe.
Meet me at the back of the bus, do not.
So it probably comes as no surprise, but the end proved to be the most eventful track recorded on that first Doors record. It would take 2 nights to capture it on tape. Night 1, Jim was again on LSD and too high to make a proper recording. Instead of the actual lyrics, he kept repeating, "Blank the mother, kill the father." You know what I mean. According to Densmore, Jim thought tripping out would help put him in a surreal mood. But the only thing it did was just give him a foul mouth. That completely tripped out, Morrison wound up lying on the floor, repeatedly mumbling the words to his Oedipus mantra. The rest of the band thought they'd never get the song down on vinyl at this point. Then suddenly Jim jumped up, he grabbed the TV and threw it at the control room window. By this point, Rothchild, he'd had enough, so he just sent Jim home. However, the singer returned in the middle of the night. He broke into the studio, he stripped naked, and with a fire extinguisher, he doused the studio in foam. Alerted to what was going on, Rothchild came back to the studio, and he somehow persuaded the naked foam-coated Morrison to call it a night. The next day, with Jim in a better frame of mind, things went a little more smoothly. With the studio darkened, lit only by candles, the guys recorded the end in just 2 takes. Rothchild ended up using the first half, take 1 for the song's beginning, and he took the second half of take 2 for its conclusion. After he finished the final edit, he said, "At that moment, I knew this band was going to be really famous." The Doors' self-titled debut album was released on January 4th, 1967, and immediately put the band at the forefront of the psychedelic movement. Rock, jazz, blues, and classical all came together to create a completely intoxicating sound. And although the record went to number 2 on the Billboard 200, it actually got off to a slow start. We've talked about this before. The first single, Break On Through, made some noise in Los Angeles, but it fell short of the Hot 100. For months after its release, album airplay was primarily limited to the rock underground in California and New York. But all that changed with the record's second single, Light My Fire. Edited down from 7 minutes to 3 minutes, Light My Fire rocketed to number 1 in the summer at 67, and the album soon followed up the charts. The End was never released as a single. It's not surprising. Aside from some of its less than radio-friendly thematic elements, it would have also have taken some serious editing to size it down for airplay back then. As it turns out, The End is the longest of all the Doors tracks, coming in at about 11 minutes and 40 seconds. Notably, the band had its fair share of extended tracks, like My Fire Riders on the Storm and LA Woman. They're all between 7 and 8 minutes. Then there's a Soft Parade, and that comes in at 8 minutes, 40 seconds. And then when the music's over, it's right at 11 minutes.
Riders on the storm. I've seen cars, the topless bars, never saw a woman.
But none of them reached the epic scope of The End. Still, even without single status, The End has gone on to create an enduring legacy in the decades that have followed. It's appeared in a number of movies and TV shows that include The 70s Show, The Simpsons, Top Gear, and Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. The end was also famously used in Apocalypse Now, which Manzarek said was absolutely thrilling, his words.
This is the end.
And predictably, the end also appears in the 1991 Doors biopic starring Val Kilmer. Brilliant performance there. As far as covers go, there are plenty of versions of the end out there. Echo and the Bunnymen did it. So did Screaming Trees, Jeff Buckley, Chris Cornell, Nirvana, Jason Cropper, formerly of Weezer, Ministry, Moby did it, Patti Smith. Then, of course, Travis Meeks of Days of the New performed it with Manzarek, Dansmore, and Krager on VH1 Storytellers back in 2000.
This is the end. Beautiful friend.
Fittingly, The End was the last song that the Doors played in concert as a foursome. This was the closer for the disastrous final Doors show at the Warehouse in New Orleans on, it was December 12, 1970. Jim Morrison was deadly drunk for the entire affair. About halfway through the set, Morrison started forgetting lyrics. Then he just leaned against a microphone stand and started telling a lot of kind of dumb jokes. According to Manzarek, that night, he witnessed Jim's essence momentarily leaving him, going out into the voodoo nights. Then during the last number of the set, The End, Jim grabbed the mic stand and began repeatedly smashing it into the stage. This is until the Doors road manager, Vince Traynor. He came out and finally calmed him down. As the notes of the last song faded away into the night, Jim remained at the mic staring out at the audience just like a ghost. After the show, Ray, Robbie, and John agreed that they had to call up the rest of the tour. It was just a really discouraging way to finish the band's live career. Of course, they didn't know it at the time. The Doors then regrouped in Los Angeles, where they completed their final album with Jim Morrison, L.A. Woman. After finishing his contributions to L.A. Woman in March of '71, Jim spent his days in Paris with his girlfriend Pam Corson, where he hoped to escape his rock star lifestyle in France. From that time in France, in itself is probably worth an entire episode for sure. But for today, we come to the day of Jim's tragic conclusion. July 3rd, 1971. Jim Morrison was found dead. He was only 27. According to Pamela, the night that Jim died, the two were listening to old Doors albums as they drifted off to sleep, including the Doors' debut album. I mean, how strange, but fitting would it be if The End had been the last song that Morrison heard before he died?
Beautiful friend.
Very haunting thought. Even so, the ghost of Jim Morrison lives on through this, through his music, especially through this epic and captivating track.
Laughter and soft light.
So many decades later, his voice coming out of whatever speaker or headphone is truly the ghost in the machine. One of the most chilling songs of the late 60s, for sure. Thanks so much for watching. Leave us a comment about The Doors and The End. What are your memories of the song? What's your interpretation of the song? Now that you understand that he's not actually talking about his own parents, it's just a strange song. What's your interpretation? Let's talk about it below. If you like our content, we invite you to subscribe below. We'd love to have you as part of our community. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friend.